This century, I think, clearly shows war and peace. Now there is not much room to move. So we have to find another alternative. Now that is deeper realization of oneness of entire human being.
The Dalai Lama, the spiritual and political leader of the Tibetan people, was forced into exile in 1959 when the Communist Chinese army tightened its grip on Tibet. I first met His Holiness in 1987 on his 4th trip to the United States. I was struck by his great personal warmth, his genuine concerns for others. In many ways, it is this quality that has defined his unique role in the world. He's a statesman, a leader of the international movement for human rights, a spokesman for the Tibetan people, and the world's foremost Buddhist leader. Perhaps most important, the Dalai Lama is someone who touches our hearts. Since going into exile, the Dalai Lama has tirelessly devoted himself to preserving the national identity of the 6 million Tibetan people. But like Mahatma Gandhi, his struggle to regain his people's sovereignty has been steadfastly non-violent. He rejects guerrilla warfare and terrorism. Instead, he encourages compassion and kindness, even toward the occupiers of his homeland. He elevates these qualities into cornerstones of the global effort to achieve world peace and human rights. In this way, he represents a new kind of world leader who embodies the principles of peace through inner development, who shows us through the general way he leads his life that the path of patience and nonviolence, while it may take longer, enhances our human dignity. In recognition of his work, the Dalai Lama was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989.
Ours has been a long struggle. We know our cause is just. Because violence can only breed more violence and suffering, our struggle must remain non-violent and free of hatred. I accept the prize with profound gratitude on behalf of all those who struggle for freedom and work for world peace.
The situation in Tibet is very grave. The Tibetan people, however, remain uncrushed after almost 4 decades of occupation. The vast majority of them still have faith that the world community will help them regain their rights. When word of the Dalai Lama's Nobel Prize reached Lhasa, the people began to celebrate, burning juniper leaves and tossing wind-borne prayers of gratitude into the air. The fires burned until the evening when the Chinese authorities, realizing their purpose, ordered them put out.
In his quest for world peace, the Dalai Lama of Tibet has traveled far and wide. In the early days of summer 1989, he arrived in Southern California to conduct a Buddhist ritual, Kala Chakra, the Wheel of Time, a mystical initiation that is believed to have a profound effect on the area where it takes place, and to hasten the dawn of world peace. In the advance party from India were 20 monks who came to construct the Kala Chakra mandala, made of fine-colored sand. The intricate lines and figures are said to contain all of time. Ocean Avenue in Santa Monica, the evening of July 3rd. A small company of organizers, monks, and well-wishers is waiting to welcome the Dalai Lama to America on this, his 5th visit. Many of the group are Tibetans who have come to greet the man who has led them in their exile for over 30 years. But there is also a large contingent of Westerners. Support for the Tibetan cause has spread far beyond the Tibetan community. The admiration the Dalai Lama inspires in people of all faiths everywhere is quite extraordinary. His captivating laugh and genuine interest in others seem to strike a deep chord of response in everyone who meets him. This man, who the Tibetans call a living Buddha.
It's a very special feeling to be in his presence, and it's not something that is easily explained. And it's nothing really mystical or weird or anything. It's just a warmth.
I've seen people radically change their sense of things and radically change their way of thinking about something just in his presence from the dialogue with him. And he's able to, because he's such a sincere person, he is really able to change people's hearts.
He doesn't give a prepackaged response. He's always there with the person. And that's extraordinary.
The Dalai Lama often says that when he meets someone, he never feels like he's meeting a stranger. That it's as if he's known the person before.
So long you see other people are showing some kind of warmth. It's a very friendly attitude. So it smile. I feel happy. Then sometimes I feel, yes, I may contribute something for their at least temporary mental peace. That also I consider purpose of life. If not benefit, it's a long, a longer time. Even if it's a short few minutes, all right. So sometimes you see, even you see, I try to smile. The other side remain like you see very serious. So sometimes feel a little bit, I'd say, uncomfortable.
The 14th Dalai Lama was found at age 2 in eastern Tibet. In Tibetan Buddhism, High Lamas are believed to reincarnate, to come back to serve a suffering humanity. Thus it was that search parties were sent out after the death of the 13th Dalai Lama. A vision guided them to the child of a humble family in a small village. The boy was tested in the customary way. Religious objects belonging to the previous Dalai Lama were offered to him along with identical replicas. It's said that he chose correctly every single time. Enthroned at age 4 in the palace of his predecessors, the young Dalai Lama grew up in a world unlike anything we're familiar with in the West. Sealed off by the high Himalayas, over 6,000 monasteries dotted the Tibetan landscape, housing a substantial portion of the entire population. In Tibet, the idea of the separation of church and state did not exist. This was a uniquely spiritual society. The rigorous monastic education system, with its practice of day-long debates and years of meditation, was the intellectual and religious foundation of life. Then came the watershed year of 1949 and the Chinese Communist occupation. At first, the Chinese assured the Dalai Lama they would not alter the society's institutions, but in the late 50s, they went back on their word. Certain that the only way to prevent a bloodbath was to go into exile, the Dalai Lama escaped across the ancient fortress of stone and ice that had isolated Tibet from the rest of the world. 100,000 Tibetans followed him into India. It was an event of enormous significance, both historically for the Tibetan people and personally for the Dalai Lama himself.
He's often said that losing the trappings of the Dalai Lama's role when they were forced to flee Tibet was an incredible blessing, that it was a tremendous training in the Buddhist belief in impermanence and renunciation, that this life is like an illusory play in many ways, and that one cannot be attached to any of these things. But until one is forced away from what you normally or habitually assume is concrete, real, and substantial, you don't really see the truth of that statement. So he has said that he felt, becoming a refugee, that it was a tremendous piece of training in his Buddhist practice.
Even in Los Angeles, the Dalai Lama starts his day around 4 in the morning with meditation and prayers, so that, as he puts it, the whole day's thought becomes something useful. Over breakfast, he listens to the news on shortwave, tuning in 3 or 4 different countries to get a variety of perspectives on world events.
About 3 hours, 20 and 70,000 when the crowd gave the unveiling, they find all these guns.
Should close your mouth. The lens open their mouth also.
Well, I have to hold my mouth right.
A full Kalachakra initiation is a major event in the Tibetan Buddhist world. Student groups come in from all over, and the Dalai Lama likes to greet as many as he can.
We're so grateful to Geshe Gyaltsen. We're so appreciative that he brought you here. We're appreciative to you and to him both. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Holiness.
Thank you. I always pray.
I know, I know.
Whenever we met, I remind the late, my great friend,
yes,
spiritual friend.
Yes. Thank you.
So we have a responsibility to fulfill his wish.
You are our father, our spiritual father, so we have to turn to you when we have problems.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The central teaching of Buddhism is that there is a path leading to enlightenment or liberation from suffering. The Kalachakra body of teachings is one of the Tibetan maps to that path. But the Kalachakra has a mysterious peace-creating aspect as well. And it's one of the reasons that this Dalai Lama has performed it more often than any of his 13 predecessors.
Usually, you see, when I perform this initiation, it seems sometimes it may contribute to something in that area, in the atmosphere. So some kind of, through mysterious way, this is some kind of, I think, positive, how to say, energy or vibration. So in any way, not harmful vibration. So you see, so I have the courage, you see, I'm making, you see, sort of, courage, determination, you see, to perform. And then, of course, you see, Kalachakra, individually, you see, Kalachakra, one of the, I think, very vast and profound tantric system. So if anyone can practice, then this is one of the, I think, very rich tantric practice. So something useful. But I am consider mainly, you see, contribution, atmosphere, surrounding the place, some kind of, you see, positive charging.
I mean, look what's happened since he's been here. I don't know about in your paper. On the cover of the Herald, 2 days in a row, was the Dalai Lama and the monks, and the article was about. I mean, what could it be about other than spiritual issues? You know, how often does any sort of spiritual issue get on the cover of a paper? You can have cardinals so and so.
Fascinated by the whole process of the Kalachakra initiation in Los Angeles, the media came to interview the man said to be a living Buddha.
My assignment for the Los Angeles Times is to do a profile of you.
Profile? Yes.
Maybe we could start with the simplest, most difficult for me question. I have to ask you, who are you? The reason, I mean, okay.
That's to say, in my mind, some kind of spontaneous is a feeling. As a monk, Buddhist monk.
Yes.
There's one indication is in my dream. Sometimes you see some, how to say, certain dreams happen. Then the immediate you see feeling, always I'm monk. In dream time, I never used to feel I'm Dalai Lama.
Oh, no, I walked away still thinking, who are you? Yeah. who was that man? No, I really, that's, you know, whoever it is, I like him and admire him and respect him very much, whoever he is. Whoever he is, he's okay, you know. So whether he's a living Buddha or somebody that got saddled with quite a bit in this life, you know, either way, he's, I trust who he is. And maybe, you know, I don't have to, I'm not going to torture myself trying to figure out who he is. But I certainly was curious to know who he thought he was, yeah.
First of all, I think that most people in our modern world don't know what a simple Buddhist monk is, and that I'm not casting any disparity upon our own spiritual traditions in the West, but from my experience, the degree to which the spiritual life of the Tibetans is vibrant and their spiritual technology is effective is astonishingly different than our own traditions. I mean, their whole life was about religion in Tibet, and the people that have been produced by their system, by their higher monastic colleges and the training that involved, as well as the tradition of retreats and hermits meditating for, you know, decades in solitude, are extraordinary human beings. So when he says simple Buddhist monk, we have nothing to compare that to in our own culture.
Before the initiation begins, the Dalai Lama and the monks must go through long days of preparatory ritual to prepare both the site and themselves. These rituals begin with a dance to invoke the Kala Chakra deity to be present during the initiation. Buddhism, deity practice is a way of working with the subtle energies of the body and its surroundings. The movements are a form of meditation. The intent is to understand and transmute the energies behind life itself, and to develop the wisdom to put them to use in the service of others. After the invocation of the Kala Chakra deity, the monks begin the construction of the mandala. Made of fine colored sand, it will become the symbolic map of the initiation. Teams of monks will work 5 18-hour days until it is completed. Meanwhile, a large backstage organization will take care of the day-to-day details of staging an esoteric Tibetan ritual in one of the busiest cities of the Western world.
In some ways, it was really hard. When you're working with all volunteer people, it's very hard to draw on enough talent and energy to accomplish such a large project as this. I think people associate Dharma, well, Dharma people seem to associate Dharma with quiet places with few people around, and they think LA is just a madhouse, you know, and how could we possibly expect to bring people there to have a spiritual experience? It's inconsistent in their minds.
bright summer's day in downtown Los Angeles, the Dalai Lama presented his ideas about the path to world peace to 6,000 people who jammed into the shrine auditorium.
Now it is, I think, important to know what is compassion. Here you see compassion, not just a mere sort of sympathy or some kind of pity, not that kind. Now so compassion here, in the sense, is some kind of sense of responsibility and want to do something and want to share the other one with others. So everyone have responsibility to shape future of humanity. So let us try to contribute as much as we can.
Anybody who did come around him seemed to be enormously affected by him. One woman I know told a friend of mine that just knowing he was in town, she felt was helpful to Los Angeles. Well, you know, that's not a way I happen to think. I don't say that she's wrong about that, but that it's not a way, you know, my head works. But whether it was a combination of the ritual, which is supposed to do with peace and be beneficial to an area, or just his person. But that was her really considered opinion that this was so, and this would be helpful to this place.
How do you keep your sense of humor through all the problems and things that you've had with Tibet and with your people? How do you keep that wonderful sense of humor you have?
I find, you see, one useful Buddhist explanation in our daily life is the theory of relative. So you see, everything having, you see, different aspects. For example, you see, one tragedy, generally, you see, people consider something very negative. But if you look from different aspects, different angle, then there maybe you find some good aspects.
What do you think realistically your chances are of getting back into your country? I mean, the Chinese have asked you to come back for a visit, haven't they? Or to come back?
That's right.
And you've said no so far, have you?
That's right.
Yeah.
Last 10 years. Now the invitation there. But you see, the problem is not just my problem, or problem with Dalai Lama or Dalai Lama institution. But the problem is 6 million Tibetan people with their culture. And that's the problem. Now people there, they really suffer so very much.
March 1988, a demonstration marking the anniversary of the 1959 uprising surges through the streets of Lhasa. The footage, recorded by a Chinese army cameraman, is smuggled out to the West. Like all the other demonstrations before and since, the Chinese response is brutal. Monastery today. At one time, it was the third largest monastery in the world, a virtual city covering an entire hillside, one of over 6,000 monasteries in Tibet. Today, a handful are left. Systematically, the monasteries were dismantled, their religious art melted down for gold and sent off to China. The Dalai Lama's government estimates that as a direct result of the Chinese communist occupation, 1.2 million Tibetans have lost their lives from military violence, starvation, and enforced labor camps. Chinese settlers now outnumber native Tibetans. The environment has been plundered of wildlife, forests, and minerals, and refugees report that the plateau has become a dumping ground for nuclear and chemical waste. And all the while, the governments of the free world, worried about hurting their political and economic ties with China, have remained virtually silent.
In fact, I think there's more than 2,000 years Tibetan history. This is the darkest period. And also, you see, the destruction. Although, you see, this kind of, you see, national tragedy happening before, but today, they so well organized, you see, destructive power. So, you see, destruction is something immense.
chainsawing goes on around the clock.
Since 1962, 24 hours a day, they say that they've been cutting down the trees and truckloads are always going by.
What can we do to invoke world support? Because what the Dalai Lama has said for years and years is that the Chinese will respond to public opinion and world pressure. What happened in Tiananmen Square has been happening in Tibet for 40 years, and that's a reality. Well, I was in Lhasa for like 14 months during the last 2 years, and at that time I used to work for the Swiss Red Cross as a translator from Tibetan to English and German. And the 10th of December, on Human Rights Day, the 40th anniversary of the adoption of Human Rights Day, the Tibetans, they intended to stage a little demonstration. And from the police station, a unit of paramilitary police, they ran out to the demonstrators, shot them on sight. They ran on to the public, which were in adjoining streets, and just shot the people. There was no attempt to arrest the people, no attempt to beat them up. There was no provocation, no threat. They just ran out, and within 2-3 seconds, they just shot the people and the demonstrators, everybody who happened to be there. Yes, well, it went in here, the bullet, and it came out there. People were carrying the flags. They were just so brave, you know. They carry the flag and they know they're going to get shot. And even after the person is shot who carries the flag, I mean, people fight to carry the flag on. And this flag is just carried and carried, and the people get shot and shot, and it's even fists against bullets.
During the Los Angeles visit, the Dalai Lama reported the gravity of the situation in Tibet to members of the refugee community gathered from all over the world. He urged them to remain hopeful and to be steadfast in their commitment to nonviolence.
To us, His Holiness is really the focal point which has kept the Tibetans together in exile and in Tibet for the last 40 difficult years. For me personally, he's been a great teacher, the person I admire a lot, not necessarily as a religious teacher, but as a basic, very caring person who not only preaches peace and nonviolence, who practices it every day.
No group of refugees that I know of that decided, against all odds, to rebuild their own spirit, to rebuild their schools, to rebuild their institutes of higher learning, and preserve their identity as a political weapon, other than the Tibetans. And when they began this grand enterprise, when they first came into exile in the early 60s, there was every indication that, number one, they wouldn't survive physically. Number two, that the peaceful, nonviolent plan His Holiness put out would never translate into hard political currency. I mean, this is a template, if you will, for the refugee experience, what they've accomplished. That it's possible to fight peacefully and constructively and one day win. Of course, it's going to take much longer, it's going to be much less sensational, and everyone's going to say that nothing's coming of it. But if the basic principles of nonviolence are adhered to, inevitably, it brings the respect of humanity to it. And when that comes, the aid of people all around the world come with it. And that's just what's happened to the Tibetans. And the Chinese have no way of fighting against it. Actually, the way the 14th Dalai Lama has safeguarded Tibetan culture and fought for the eventual freedom of his homeland from Chinese occupation is the quintessential expression of his spiritual values.
The foundation of His Holiness's ability to bear up under his incredibly strenuous burden of obligations and yet enjoy himself enormously and maintain, as he calls it, great jolliness and good humor, and cheer a lot of other people up pretty inexhaustibly or seemingly inexhaustibly. The basis of that is wisdom, basically. The human being, from the Buddhist point of view, is a marvelous machine, is the most marvelous machine in the universe. And the reason that human beings stress themselves out and stress each other out is because of their ignorance. Because various ideologies and habits and cultural ideas even religious ideas sometimes have persuaded them, traditionally, that there's something wrong with them. Based on ignorance of the nature of reality, they are creating themselves a negative situation out of a positive situation. From the Buddhist point of view, if you know your own reality, in the sense of you are a part of the relative world, there's no absolute you that is sort of some isolated little core that is sort of fighting its way against the universe. Enlightenment means you see through this illusion of being you versus the universe, and you realize that it is you as part of the universe, you as a relativity with the universe. So suddenly it's you in partnership with the universe. You then draw strength from the universe. Those of us who have still ignorance, since we're confused, where are we, what are we doing, is this helping me or not, what's going on? We have so much energy invested in anxiety and stress and fear. We can't enjoy ourselves even in the most enjoyable situations. So naturally we're amazed seeing somebody keeping up a heavy stressed schedule. He drinks only hot water and no tea and coffee. He doesn't need any alcohol, he doesn't need any this and that. And yet he totally enjoys himself.
Bala. Yes. Yes. Hello.
On the Dalai Lama's 54th birthday, a party was given for him in the Malibu Hills.
Your Holiness.
His host for the Los Angeles visit, Geshe Tsultim Gyaltsen, delivered a welcome speech translated for him from the Tibetan, with all the formalities of that language rendered into English, word for exact word.
And well-blessed city of Los Angeles
To his credit, the good monk recognized the problem.
Now, I would like, anyway, I will make short.
But when Geshe Gyaltsen mentioned the number of times the Dalai Lama had given the Kala Chakra,
this Kala Chakra will be 13.
His guest understood he was talking about the upcoming Kala Chakra's dates.
No, 13. Kala Chakra, 16, 17, 18.
No. 18 times.
16, 17, 18, 3 days. The other come on, I see. I don't know, I can't remember.
That is a great sign. His Holiness will give 18 times. The quote from His Holiness. He has said his views bring a soothing message of hope and in closing. May I take this opportunity wish for the good health and the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
What the Dalai Lama is able to do simultaneously is be heard and felt by all levels of educated people, even the level of non-educated people can understand his message. The brilliance of it is that they all understand his feelings. They may not understand the academics because it's complicated, but you can't miss the feeling. You can't miss catching the spirit. It's infectious. It's a beautiful infection. And at the birthday party, he let 300 or 400 people into him privately at the same time also. He really let them into him.
a Buddhist monk who practiced daily the, realization of impermanence and practice or concentrate on nature of old age, illness, birth, death. So is a birthday, new birthday reminds me is these things more fresh. In any case, I think if suppose I live even 100 years, now most of them now gone. If I look in the past, more than 50 years, I think I made some contribution, at least for some people. That is the purpose of life. That's the meaning of life. So I try my best, according to my own capacity, little capacity. So one is Shantadeva's verses. As long as space remains, as long as suffering of sentient beings remain, I will remain to serve. That's my favorite quotation. Although difficult to practice, but I is determined to practice this kind of thing. So that gives me hope and gives me inner satisfaction.
In the Tibetan tradition, Buddhist monks and nuns aspire to practice the highest tantric yogas so they can control the process of death and reincarnate at will. This is done to fulfill their vow to unceasingly help those of us who still suffer. Made at ordination, when they first shave their heads, this vow is continuously renewed. The higher yogas are only begun after a lengthy period of practicing the precepts, several hundred rules of conduct that in the Buddhist religion form the foundation for selfless behavior towards others.
I always looking result side of various different religions rather than differences of philosophy. If you look philosophy, then there is big differences. But then you see, if you look the result side, I found many, very sincere, very warm-hearted person. So if we human beings, if we think properly, what is the reality of human community, human society? We live together. We have to live together. We very much depend on one another. So you see, that is we need. We don't need a temple, or we don't need, these big cathedral, these things. We really need this, warmth of heart. That we need. So you see, every religion, has potential, to do that, to develop that thing. So wherever I go, different places, and meet different people, I'm not talking about Buddhism. I'm simply, talking about these things. This is what we need, warmth of heart.
Well, His Holiness is a Geshe, what is called a Geshe, something like a PhD in Buddhist studies. And that degree usually takes 25, 30 years of study by a Tibetan Lama to achieve. His Holiness achieved it rather more quickly because he had some practice in previous lives, Tibetans think, and some Westerners. And also, he was particularly brilliant and very gifted and learned very quickly. He reads Scientific American, he reads selected books on quantum physics and things like that. He's extraordinarily gifted. One reason I think he's not been appreciated that way enough is his English, technical terminology in English is limited, and it comes out clear but simplified. When he has dialogues with Western scientist, which he takes a great interest in, and which there's been a program to have him do in the last 5 or 6 years, he brings to bear a certain critical questioning and inquiry, process of inquiry that really leaves his dialoguers, breathtaken. I mean, they really are amazed. He's a head of state. He's a simple monk. He's a simple human being. He's a great master. He's a great philosopher. He's a Tibetan freedom fighter. He has all these different, and he switches. He's an office bureaucrat who's involved in organizing an office. And anyone who's ever sat with His Holiness in a tantric ritual where he adopts the role of being a Vajra master, and initiatorily has to give the kind of sense of what is known as the divine confidence of a Buddha, or Buddha confidence. When he moves his bell, or when he moves his hand with a certain sweeping and very majestic gesture, he's extremely capable of showing great ego definition, let us say. Very capable of it, but never in a rigid way. He can then change immediately and laugh and be just totally ordinary. So this is the key, I think, to that famous "I'm a simple Buddhist monk" statement. The key to it is that it's totally sincere. He's not affecting some false humility when he gets into it, but it's totally flexible. And he can be a complex being when it is to the benefit of other beings for him to be very complex and not just simple.
My previous life, where? I don't know. That's either this planet or other planet. I don't know. Yes.
I'd like to talk about your experience in this room. I'd like to talk about your experience in this room now. I imagine, with great respect, that your experience is broader and deeper than mine. I wonder... I imagine, than mine. Your experience more than mine, I think. And I wonder what I'm missing in this moment.
I don't. There are so many variety of experiences. And also some due to previous life. And also due to environment, due to social background, due to educational background. So there are so many variety. So in some field, I have more deeper experience. In some cases, you have more deeper experiences. So you usually can't say, isn't it? So in any way, naturally, I think I think I can say, the Buddhist practice, I have more experience, and your case missing. That is definite.
And so how does that change your experience of this moment in this room? Let me put this differently. When you look into my eyes, it seems to me you see very deeply, more deeply than perhaps someone else. Is that not so? And if so, what do you see?
Oh. I mean, do you referring to the extinguishers of this already? No? I don't know. Okay. I think your eyesight may be stronger. It's my case, without glass, I can't see properly. At least in your case, without glass, you can see very, very perfectly.
Thank you.
Along that line,
I think maybe to me, whenever I met someone, I always feel Kasure, just another human being. I have no feeling of sort of stranger. That sometimes to me is very helpful. Whenever I met, oh yes, as if Kasure something.
As if His Holiness knows the person from before.
Yes.
So that kind of attitude, to me, is very helpful. At once, with that feeling, no more barrier. I can easily communicate.
It seems very clear that one thing he has to offer is to remind us of our own compassion, our own higher self. He's a very provocative man. Here is a man who has said in the past that his greatest teacher was Mao Zedong. Why? Because he taught him patience. The man who engineered the destruction of his country.
I guess many people wonder why you don't exhibit anger or
publicly show impatience, given the circumstances that you've just described?
And with anger or hatred or ill feeling, I'm useless. It won't help our own cause. It won't help my own future. As you see, some important Buddhist text mentioned, the ill feeling or anger, hatred, is almost like a self-destruction, self-ruin. So now, for example, in my case, if I've developed some irritation, some anger, the result I lost is my appetite. I lost my sleep. And eventually I think my health will deteriorate or weaken.
But I guess it's easier to see the results of anger than it is to see the results of compassion.
I don't think. It's a way of compassion. You see, the equally, energetic or, powerful action will come. Anyone who's looking after you?
No, friend of hers. This is my husband.
Ah, oh.
My husband. This is my husband.
How long since this comes?
12 years old.
12 years.
I was 12 or 16 overnight. I was 12 overnight. And I'm 16 now. Thank you very much.
I think we have a danger of admiring people and then putting them on a pedestal. And that enables us to admire them, but we don't in any way have to imitate what we admire because it's unattainable. They're special, they're different, so that's fine for him, and I wish him well. And I think that if you really listen to what he's saying, or just watch how he behaves and conducts himself in the course of a day, you'll realize, he is spending all of his life making sure that he's not on a pedestal.
On Monday, I came here on a crutch and in pain. On Tuesday, I came without crutch or pain. If it was a healing, how did it happen without your Holiness's cognition or mine? I don't know. All right.
You read about people crying tears of joy. I have that experience around him. And the dreams is very interesting because in London I work for the Office of Tibet and we get letters all the time. People who are not Buddhists, people who have had apparently no interest or anything, writing and saying how he's manifested in dreams and what does this mean and this sort of thing.
I reached a point in my life where, because of my drinking and drugging, I was in a state of depression, suicidal depression. My booze habit didn't cost me much because I own a bar, but my cocaine habit cost me a lot. And I would deal, lie, steal to keep myself high. And conscience bothers you when you do things like this. And so you do more drugs and more alcohol to get rid of the pain of the conscience bothering you. And in order to do that, you have to steal more, lie more, deal more, and it's a snowball. And I was at the end of my ropes when I heard that His Holiness was coming to speak in Amherst. I stayed straight and sober that day, clean and sober, and I went to see him. And I remember when I first saw him, I just, it's a very special feeling to be in his presence, and it's not something that is easily explained.
Welcome to Santa Monica.
Thank you.
Very well.
And it's nothing really mystical or weird or anything. It's just a warmth. It's, he just feels like a really true, sincere, open-hearted, brilliant human being who really cares about everybody. And to be in the presence of somebody that's that purely motivated it's wonderful. I heard he was coming back in '81, so I called the people that were bringing him. They needed a bodyguard and a chauffeur, so I couldn't believe it. It was like I had never dreamed anything like that could happen, that I could be close to him. And the feeling of being with him at that point, because had been at such a low, was such an intense, wonderful, blissful, all these silly words, excuse me. It's hard to find words to express the joy of being around a person like that, having come from the emotional depths that I had been submerged in for so long. It gave me incredible hope for myself, and not only for myself, but for everybody, because the seed is there in all of us, and that's the message. You know, we all have the potential. We can all do it. And all we got to do is be open-hearted, sincere, and open-minded, and open your heart to the suffering of all beings.
I wanted to ask you about this journey that you have been on from, well, I guess from the beginning, but more as the Dalai Lama from the age of 4. What you were most proud of? What have you been able to accomplish as the Dalai Lama?
One way I feel is just as a simple Buddhist monk, say I can't do much. Although you say I have the sincere motivation, to do and to contribute for welfare of the human community or all sentient being and Buddha Dharma. But on the other hand, because of circumstances, it's not like the previous Dalai Lama's time, the amount of people suffering, including Tibetan wild animal. This is so much suffering. Then, under these circumstances, not my ability, but because of the circumstances, I think, my being, I think it becomes some useful for Tibetan people, for Tibetan culture, for Tibetan, their future right. So sometimes I feel, yes, under worst circumstances, I contributed something. That's my great achievement.
Kala Chakra, the wheel of time. There is an ancient prophecy in the Kala Chakra literature that at some time in the future, the inhabitants of a far-off land will appear in our world to establish peace. The Vajra master, who gives the initiation, tells those in attendance they can undertake to be reborn during that time, to help the human race through what is prophesied to be a difficult and dangerous period. To accomplish this, they must scale the highest heights of the Buddha Dharma and attain the mind that is beyond birth and death, the mind of highest realization, the mind that is symbolized in the entire creation and dissolution of the Kala Chakra mandala. Tibetan Buddhists believe that through a mysterious energy, the Kala Chakra has a profound effect on the surrounding area that hastens the ancient dream of humanity for a world of peace. That the Vajra master who conducts the initiation displays this energy through his entire being, showing in the most direct way how the path to a world of peace must travel through the hearts of each and every one of us.
Be a good human being with good heart. That gives you brighter future. That gives you energy, peace, tranquility. And also, you see, that gives you inner strength. So usually I call compassion, love is something like universal religion. Without, you see, except any other, you see, complicated religious system. Simply, you see, being a good person.
When the interview ended, at a personal level, I just didn't want that interview. I didn't want that time to be over with him. It bothered me, and I really felt like this. I'm going to have to say goodbye to him now. I couldn't stand that. I wanted to spend more time with him.
Thank you.